friends, welcome to Love and Life's Journey. I'm Chantel. Today I am bringing to you a compilation of 20 easy, budget-friendly farmhouse DIYs. So let's get started. For this project you will need 2 of these garden fence pieces found in the gardening section at Dollar Tree, some craft paint. I think that this chalk paint from Waverly in the color of ivory works really well, and you can find this at Walmart. I believe it's about $4. You will need a hot glue gun and glue sticks, and some tools that you will need or that might be helpful are a box cutter, wire cutters, scissors, a paintbrush, sandpaper, and I would recommend a cutting board as well. First we're going to cut the garden fence pieces out in some specific shapes to create our heart. So the first one that we're going to do is what I'm calling the main piece, and it's going to be the top of the heart. You can just use a good pair of scissors to cut this, but I did find it helpful to use the wire cutters in several places. Just the angle that you need to cut in some places, different tools work better. I even found that in some places using the box cutter to kind of score it before I cut it with scissors or the wire cutters was helpful. And then you just want to trim off any rough edges, and this is what the first piece looks like, or the main piece. Then you'll need to cut 3 of these X-shaped pieces with the arrow sticking out of one end. Unfortunately, you can't get all the pieces out of one garden fence. You will have to use the second garden fence to get your third X. You will need to leave one of the X pieces exactly like it is, and then the other 2 we're going to cut them apart. And the way we're going to cut it is just right down the center, but leave the arrow on one side. So you're going to have a C-shaped piece, and then the other one will be a C-shaped piece with the arrow on it. And so this is what it should look like. And you will do this with 2 of the X pieces. It's important when you cut these apart that you end up with the 2 C-shaped pieces with the arrows in them, so that they will sit this way with the arrows on the outside edge. So you will have 6 pieces total, and this is what they should look like. Once you have your pieces cut, you'll want to take your scissors and just trim off any rough edges or pointy edges and try to make them look rounded and more uniform. And I found that in some of the thicker places the wire cutters worked well, but most of the time you could just use your scissors. Then just take a piece of sandpaper and sand off any rough edges. So I'm not sure what happened to the video of me gluing these first 2 pieces together, but you'll just take the big main piece and then glue the X on top of it with the arrow pointing down like you see here. You will want to make sure that your center line of the main piece and the arrow all line up in a straight line. Then you're going to take the C pieces that have the arrow on them, and you're going to lay the arrow part over the top of those curls at the bottom of that X piece. And you'll just have to kind of play with it till you get it in position. And I have the top of that C piece up against the main piece, and you just play with it till it looks symmetrical and you like the way it looks, and then just glue it together with your hot glue. One tip I have for you is to use a little scraper. I have one from Pampered Chef that I got with some stoneware that I bought. I have several of them, and so I took one and I used this to clean off excess hot glue. This kind of helps prevent my fingers from getting burned, and it takes the extra hot glue off really easily. If you don't have a little scraper like this, I'm sure you can find something else around the house to use. I just had a lot of these, so I just used one of those, but probably even a little piece of cardboard or something would work. Next, we're going to close in the sides of the hearts by using those two C pieces that we cut, and I just lined them up on the heart. I put it so that the bottom curl is right up next to that curl of the pieces that we just put on, and then the top curl kind of goes over the top of the one that is on the main piece, and you just kind of have to play with it and line it up till it looks good to your eye and how you like it. It's not going to line up perfectly, but it really doesn't matter once you get it all painted and put together. The main thing is to just have the edges kind of follow a nice smooth line to make it have that heart shape. So this is what it looks like once it's all glued together. And then I'm just going to take my chalk paint and just brush the paint all over this piece. And I found that a bristle brush worked better than a foam brush. I felt like I could get into the little cracks and crevices a little bit better with the bristle brush, because I could kind of just push it in there really well without the paint blobbing everywhere. So I'm just going to paint the whole thing. Once that's dry, then I'll turn it over and kind of fill in the edges on the back side. You don't have to paint the back side completely, but it will help the edges be painted if you turn it over and paint it from the back side. I did find that about halfway through, I needed to turn it over and clean up any drips on the front so that you don't get any blobs of paint, because those will show. So just turn it over a couple of times when you're doing the back side and clean up those drops. Once I was done painting the back, I did turn it over and I gave the front a second coat of paint. Once the paint was completely dry, I took a piece of sandpaper and I just sanded off a little bit of the white paint in various places so that the black shows through. This gives it an aged look and that farmhouse look, and just makes it look weathered and old, and I just really like that effect. And so I just did that all over the heart. You can do that as little or as much as you like. If you accidentally sand off too much in a place and you don't like it, then you can just paint over that, let it dry, and sand it a little bit again. When you're all finished, if you like, you could spray this with a clear sealer. I would recommend using a matte finish so that it keeps that old look and doesn't look shiny. Then I'm just going to add a hanger to the back of this, and I'm just going to take a little piece of the scrap that I had left from the garden fence, and I'm just taking it from one of the little arched pieces and fitting it to that little center part, and I'm just going to hot glue that in the middle there, and then that will make a place for a nail to catch so that I can hang this on the wall. So here it is, all finished and hanging on the wall. I love how it turned out, and it only cost $2 to buy those two fence pieces from Dollar Tree. The paint I already had on hand, as well as the hot glue and the other supplies to make it. So for $2, I could not be happier. And for the next project, I took 4 of these hearts and I combined them together to make this gorgeous, oversized wall medallion. So let me show you how I did that.
So in addition to the 4 hearts, you're going to need an extra fence piece, and we're going to cut 4 pieces out of that one fence piece, and these are going to be the pieces that go in between the hearts to complete the medallion. These pieces basically consist of the top arch piece and then the arrow part, and the only part we really don't need are those swirls at the bottom. So I'm going to cut those off, and then I'm going to separate each arched piece, and we're going to leave that arrow piece attached in the middle. So this is the shape that you need, and we need 4 of those, and you can get all 4 of those out of one fence piece. Then I'm just taking my ivory colored chalk paint and painting these just like I did the hearts. So the exact same technique that I did on the hearts. And I paint a couple of coats of paint on these and make sure I get all on the sides and everywhere. Once they're painted and they're completely dry, then I'm going to take the sandpaper just like I did on the hearts and just run over them just kind of randomly. And I start out light at first and just knock off a little bit of that paint to give it a worn look, and then you can always go back and take off a little bit more if you want. If you accidentally take off too much, then you can just add a little bit more paint in. But I'm going to do this on all 4 pieces as well. Once you have the 4 hearts and the 4 pieces that are going to go in between the hearts, then it's time to assemble this. And this is probably the hardest part, just getting it lined up. And so I'm taking 2 of the hearts and putting them with the points together, and then I'll take the other 2 hearts and I'm going to put them on the sides. So it's kind of like a 4-leaf clover. And I'm actually setting the ones on the sides on top of the ones that are on the top and bottom. So they're overlapping some, and I'll show this up close here so you can see a little bit better. So if you're looking straight down at it, this is what you want it to look like. Once you have them lined up, then you just take your hot glue gun, and I'm using the Gorilla Glue sticks. I think that they hold better, and so anywhere that they are overlapping and touching, I am putting the glue in there to hold it together. So now that I have the 4 hearts attached to each other, I'm going to take one of those filler pieces that we cut to fill in between the hearts, and I'm just going to line it up so that it fits in between, and then use the hot glue again to attach it. Then I'm going to continue that with the other 3 pieces. Now I did have a little bit of trouble with the spacing. My hearts didn't quite have the same spacing, but I felt like it was more important to get that center lined up because of those arrows and all pointing to the center. I feel like that's where your eye is drawn to. So I really made sure that the center of my heart was lined up, and then these pieces that are filling in between the hearts, I just tried to space them the best that I could, and they weren't perfect, but you really don't notice it. Once I have it all glued together, I'm going to very carefully flip it over, and it's a little flimsy because it's so big. It's like 28 inches in diameter. So I'm going to flip it over carefully, and then on the back side I'm going to add quite a bit of hot glue anywhere where the pieces meet and where they need securing more, and this will make it a lot stronger. I'm also going to take my wire cutters and snip off the ends of those in-between pieces that are sticking out a little bit, just because I don't want them to show from the front side. And so it's just really easy to snip those off where they're sticking out. So here is my finished medallion, and I think it turned out amazing. I love how it looks, and I'm actually, I think, going to put it up above my fireplace, and I think it's going to look great there. I have to do a little patching on the wall first, but I think it turned out great. And so let me know in the comments what you think of it. But I'm really excited because overall this cost me $7 to make. I needed 7 of those garden fences and I already had the paint. So for $7 and a little bit of work, I am really pleased with this.
This next project is not nearly as time consuming, but I think it turned out beautiful as well.
You'll need one of these unfinished wood love signs from Dollar Tree. Some type of paint. I'm using this ivory chalk paint from Waverly you can get at Walmart. And this apple barrel gray paint that I had on hand. You can get these at Walmart as well for like 50 cents. You also need one of these wall sticker sheets from Dollar Tree. This is 1 Corinthians 13 and it is the love chapter or part of it. First, I just took my ivory chalk paint and painted all of the love sign. Once my paint was dry, then I just took the gray apple barrel paint that I had and a makeup sponge, and I'm just going to take a little bit of the gray paint, a whole lot less than I poured out here because I used like 1/16 of what I poured out. But you just take a little bit and put on your sponge and remove the excess, and then I'm just dabbing it all along the edges of the sign. And you can go as light or as dark as you want with this. It just gives it dimension and gives it a little bit of a worn look. And so the nice thing about using the sponge, I actually got the tip of the sponge wet, the side that I don't have paint on, and then if I accidentally got too much paint in any areas, I could just turn that little sponge around and use the wet side to remove the extra paint, and that worked really well. Once I had the edges done, then I just took the sponge and put a few smudges around in the centers of the letters just to give them a little bit more of a worn look. Then with just a pair of scissors, I'm cutting out the words that I think I want to use on this. And some of them I had to trim pretty close to the words so that I could fit them on the piece. But I just trimmed anything that I thought I might want to use so that I could have that to kind of play with and decide how I wanted to lay it out. Then I just started laying them out on my piece. I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted them to be. At first I thought I wanted to use the different fonts, and so I tried that first, but then I decided that I didn't really like the black font on here, and I decided that I wanted to use all of the same font and the light gray. So once I got my layout just the way I wanted it, then all I had to do was peel the backing off of the stickers and adhere them to the wood piece. So that's all there is to it. You could leave the twine on it and hang it. You could take the twine off, and it has the little picture hangers on the back, so you could just hang it on the wall without the twine, or you can even just take the twine off and just stand it up so it will sit on a shelf or a table. For this, I picked up 3 of these little picture frames from Dollar Tree with the galvanized backing and the little clip. And I had these pots from the Faux succulents that you get at Dollar Tree, and I've been wondering what to use them for. I've used the succulents for other projects, so that's what I decided to use for this project. I'll also be using a package of these little chalkboard wooden stakes from Dollar Tree, as well as some picture hangers, and I think I picked these up at Walmart. And then I'll be using some E6000 and my hot glue gun. First, I'm just going to take the picture frames and remove the stand off of the back. You just want to pull this off carefully, and it should pop right off. Then I'm going to take my picture hangers, and I'm going to use some E6000 and my hot glue just to attach this to the top of the back of the picture frame. And I just measure and find the center just to get that centered. So I'm putting the E6000 on to give it a strong bond, and then I'm adding a little bit of my hot glue just to help that to hold right away so that it will stay in place while the E6000 is drying. So I often use these faux succulents from Dollar Tree for craft projects, and that leaves me with the pot that it came out of because I saved these, and I wasn't sure what to do with them, so I decided to use these for this project. And I'm just removing the styrofoam out of the pot. You could just use a butter knife or any other tool that you can slip down inside there just to pull it out. Next, I will be gluing the pot onto the galvanized metal part with just some E6000 and hot glue. And I will repeat this with all 3 of the pots. Then I'm going to take these chalkboard wood stakes from Dollar Tree. I was so excited when I saw these in the store, and I'm just going to pop off the stick off the back, and I just did this carefully and it popped right off. You could use regular chalk to write on these, but I decided to use a chalk marker, and I really like the way these write. I think I picked this up at Michael's, and we used them for my daughter's wedding, but they just write a little brighter and they don't rub off like chalk, although it is a little bit more permanent. You can use a Mr. Clean magic eraser to get this off of the chalkboards after it's been on for a while, so there's a little tip that we found. And I'm just writing the names of the herbs that I'm going to be planting in these little pots on these little signs. And next I'm going to add some potting soil to my little pots and plant my herbs in there. Once it's all finished, I just hang it in a sunny place where it will get a good amount of sunshine, and because these pots are pretty small, you have to remember to water them fairly often. But I just think these are so cute, and like I said, once they start growing a fair amount, probably would want to plant these in a bigger pot. So this is just a little mini herb nursery, and I think it's adorable. So if you don't want to have a little herb garden, or you don't have a green thumb, which honestly I really don't, but here's an alternative. So those little faux succulents from Dollar Tree, just go ahead and use those. Now, you could put them on there the way they are in the pots, but I don't like the looks of the styrofoam, so I pulled mine out. And I'm just going to add some of this moss. This is actually from Walmart, because for some reason my Dollar Tree doesn't think they need to carry green moss. It's always brown. And so I picked this green moss up at Walmart, and I'm just going to take a little bit of that green moss and hot glue it to the top of that styrofoam, just to cover that up and make it look a little bit more natural. And then I'm going to glue that succulent back into the pot, and this will just kind of give it a little bit more of a natural and finished look. Then for my little signs, instead of writing the names of herbs on them, I am going to write Home Sweet Home, and again I'm using the chalk marker that I picked up at Michael's. And you could write anything you want on these. I'm doing Home Sweet Home. You could write Live, Laugh, Love, or anything else that you'd like to put on these, just to personalize it. And then to finish these off, I just attach the signs to those little clips right above the succulent. To make this K-cup holder, I will be using 4 of these little thankful signs from Dollar Tree. They are hollow and have a picture hanger in the back. They also have this style. Instead of the black and white buffalo check, it's more of a plaid on the sides. And I'll also be using 1 package of the wooden rulers from Dollar Tree. Then I'm going to be using some black craft paint and a foam brush, and this is just apple barrel black paint from Walmart. Then I'll be using my hot glue gun, and I'm using Gorilla Glue sticks in this, and I would recommend using Gorilla Glue sticks or even using some E6000 if you're not going to use the Gorilla Glue. So first I'm going to take the plastic off of the signs, and then I'm going to gently pull off the picture hanger that is on the back of them. And I will just repeat this for all 4 signs. Then I will take the 2 rulers, and the colored strips that have the measurements on them are just stuck on, so they will peel right off, and there will be a little bit of sticky left on the ruler, so I just take a little bit of sandpaper and rub over the top of that, and that takes it right off. Next I'm going to take my black craft paint, and I will paint the side of the rulers that I removed the measurements from. There is a little bit of a raised part in the center of this side, and so I'm going to be painting that side and then also the edges, but for now I'm going to leave the back side unpainted. Next I'm going to take the signs, and on the back side I'm going to just use my foam brush and take some paint. I'm going to paint the edges all the way around the sign, and then I'm going to paint the insides of the signs as well, and I will do this for all 4 signs. I did end up using a smaller paintbrush to get down inside of the corners and fill in some of the places on the ends. Another way you could do the edges is just to take a black Sharpie marker and color along those edges. If you have a nice new Sharpie marker, it works best. Now I'm going to take the flat unpainted side of the ruler and I'm going to just hold it up onto the side of the sign and mark the ends. And I'll do this on all 4 ends of the 2 rulers. Now I took a long time trying to lay this out and get it spaced just right because the 2 signs in the center I'm going to actually tilt, and so it was a little bit tricky. So I'm just going to give you the measurements of how to mark your ruler, and then you'll know where to place these. So each end of the ruler is going to be 1 1/4 inches. Then you're going to have a mark that's 4 inches and 3 1/2 inches, 2 inches, and then again 1 1/4. And I know that doesn't really make any sense, but it all comes out in the end. Just trust me. There is a method to my madness. So I don't know what happened to the video of me actually gluing these, but I glued the signs on the top and the bottom of the ruler basically, and I put my ruler so that the hole in the ruler is facing up. And then I will glue the other ruler on the other side so that I basically have a box. And you want to make sure that the open sides of your signs are facing up. So now I'm going to glue in the 2 middle signs, and this is where those measurements come in. And so at the 2-inch mark, I am going to put the bottom of another sign and put that corner of the sign right on that mark. Now I don't want to put these just flat straight across. I want to tilt them. So I'm going to keep that bottom corner of the sign on that 2-inch mark, and then I'm going to tilt the sign until the opposite top corner is right on the edge, the other edge of the ruler, just as you see here. And then I will just use some Gorilla Hot Glue to attach this to the ruler. Then I'm going to add the 4th sign. I'm going to put that bottom corner of this sign on that mark where we marked the 4 inches. And then I'll basically put this on the same way. That bottom corner is going to go on that 4-inch mark, and then I'm going to tilt the sign and line up that other top corner on the edge of the ruler, and then I'll glue it down with some Gorilla Glue as well. Then I'm going to flip it over and glue the other edges of those 2 center signs, and I'm just using my ruler to make sure I get the one at 2 inches, and then the top one will be at 4 inches. Now I just need to paint the insides of those rulers where I had my measurements on the inside. I didn't want to paint them beforehand because then I would not be able to see my measurements well, and also I wanted the glue to adhere really well, so I thought that'd be best to wait and paint it after I glued them. I did try to use the foam brush for this, but it was just too big and I ended up switching to a smaller brush. So here it is, and I love how it looks. The black and white buffalo check is real farmhouse looking, and it holds 24 K-cups perfectly, and I love it right next to the Keurig machine, how it's just so compact and right up against the wall. It's perfect. It's exactly what I wanted. And it only costs $5 to make. You can't beat that.
Next I will be making the Succulent chalkboard sign. This is perfect for a tiered tray or for just somewhere where you need a small decor piece. So for this I picked up this little chalkboard sign on the stand at Dollar Tree, and then 2 succulents. These are the little faux succulents. I'll also be using some Spanish moss, and honestly I don't know if this one came from Dollar Tree, but you can get different types of moss at Dollar Tree. And I'll be using a chalkboard marker, which you can get at Dollar Tree. So this first step is optional. I just decided to take some painter's tape and tape off the chalkboard on the inside. I thought it would make painting the frame a little bit faster and easier, but you totally do not have to do this, and just as long as you're careful while you're painting the frame. Once I had that all taped off, then I'm just using some Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory, and I'm going to give all of the wood 2 coats of this paint. I went ahead and removed my painter's tape, and then I realized I probably should have left it on for this next step because I'm going to also dry brush some darker paint over this just to give it a little bit more of a weathered look. And so I used some of the elephant colored chalk paint by Waverly and just dry brush some of this on. Dry brushing is when you just get a very little bit of paint on a dry brush and then lightly brush it over the paint just to give it a little bit of a distressed look. So now I'm going to take a little bit of my moss and just glue it in the bottom left corner, and that's just going to be kind of a base to put my succulents on. Then I'm just going to use my hot glue gun and glue those succulents right onto the frame. And I did use a pair of wire cutters to trim the stems of the succulents down before I glued them on. And that's all there is to it. Now it's ready for you to write any message that you would like to on it. I love doing projects with these faux succulents. This one was so easy and I really like how it came out. For this next project, I am going to be using this word family that I picked up at Dollar Tree. It's made out of plastic, and I'm going to be using some Waverly ivory colored chalk paint. It's my favorite, and I am going to just dry brush all over this thing just to give it more of a farmhouse look. And if you wanted to, you could totally paint the whole word if you wanted it to be white. There are a lot of little spaces to paint inside of this, and I didn't really want to take the time to do that. Plus I thought I wanted to have the black with a white accent. So that's what I am doing. A lot of times you can find these words in the aisle with the picture frames at Dollar Tree, and they usually have several different words: love, laugh, family live, maybe, I'm not sure, but I have seen different words. So this is just really easy DIY just to make this look more farmhouse, and that's it. That's all there is to it. And since this is plastic, you can kind of rub off some of the excess right away if you get a little bit more than you like, and you probably saw me doing that, but it's really easy to work with. And I think it makes just a really cute accent piece just to your decor, especially when you have it next to a family picture or something. So super easy, and it cost $1. I will be using these 3 little wall decor pieces that I picked up in my last Dollar Tree haul. They just went together so well, and I decided to pair them with some of this burlap ribbon, also from Dollar Tree. And I love that they looked so good together. I didn't need to do anything to these wall decor pieces, so I am just putting them together in a grouping to make them look more like an upscale decor piece. So first I laid them out vertically the way I wanted with the spacing that I wanted, and then I'm just measuring my ribbon to be about 6 inches longer on the top and the bottom. So I want it to be about 12 inches longer than the length of the actual wall decor pieces. Hopefully that made sense, but you will see what I'm doing with it as I go along. So I just turned the wall decor pieces over, and I am going to be gluing my ribbon to the back of these. And I'm leaving, like I said, 6 inches at the top, and then I'll glue the ribbon down, and I'm trying to center it on these wall decor pieces the best I can. So if you are new to my channel and you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you stick around by hitting that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell and set your notifications so that you will not miss out on any DIY projects that are coming up. I'm just using my hot glue gun to glue this down, and I would highly recommend using some of these finger protectors that Dollar Tree carries. These are amazing, and since the burlap ribbon is a very loose weave, the glue will come through that ribbon, and it's really easy to burn your fingers. So I highly recommend those finger protectors. You can find them usually in the crafting aisle, the craft supplies, Crafter's Square section of Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to continue gluing all 3 of the pieces down, and I'm just measuring in between, making sure the gap between the wall decor pieces is the same and that my ribbon is centered. Next, I'm going to take another piece of the burlap ribbon, and I'm making a loop. I'm going to hot glue that together so that I have a loop, and then I'm going to pinch it in the center and glue that together to make a bow. And really, you can just make this any size that you like, that you think looks good. You know, some people like a smaller bow, some people like a bigger bow, just is really personal preference. Next, I'm going to cut a short piece of burlap ribbon for the center of the bow, and I'm going to be using a piece of jute twine to tie around the center of the bow just to cinch it up. Then I will wrap that small piece of burlap ribbon around the center and glue it on the back to finish off my bow. Then I'm going to take the top of the ribbon that's glued to the decor pieces, and I am going to fold it over just to make a nice clean edge, and I will glue that down to secure it, and then I'm going to glue my bow on the top of that. And I'm just sticking my metal ruler underneath it so that the hot glue doesn't stick to the paper that I have down protecting my desk, and so it will peel off easily off of that metal ruler. Then at the bottom of my piece, I'm going to trim off the extra ribbon that I don't want, and then I'm going to cut a little notch in that ribbon just to give it a nice finished edge. And the last step is to add a little hanger to this. So I am taking some jute twine and I'm just tying a loop, and then I'm going to glue that to the back of the burlap bow. So my inspiration piece is this 3-tier hanging basket wall rack from Wayfair. It's on sale for $74, regularly $104. Mine is going to be a bit smaller, but a whole lot cheaper. I'm going to use these 3-wire baskets from Dollar Tree. And I'll be using 2 of these 5-gallon paint stir sticks. I picked this 3-pack up at Walmart for $1.47. I'll also be using these little clip-on chalkboards from Dollar Tree, as well as this little wooden home word that I found in the Crafter's Square aisle at Dollar Tree. And to assemble this, I'm going to be using my Stanley staple gun. First, I'm going to be staining the 2 paint sticks I'm going to be using, and you could just use regular stain for this, but if you don't have stain, you can use some brown acrylic paint and water it down, and then just paint it on like you would stain and wipe off the excess. And the more you water it down, the lighter it will be. And just remember, you can keep building and making it darker, but it's harder to make it lighter. Most of the paint will soak into the wood, but if you do have any excess, just wipe it off with a paper towel. Next, I'm putting a scrap piece of wood on my desk to protect it from the staple gun, because I'm not sure how far these staples are going to go in. And I'm going to draw a guide on this wood board to help me line up my paint sticks. So I'm just measuring how far apart I need the sticks to be and marking that, and then I'm going to draw some lines so that I can continue to line those up as I am working on the project. Once I have my guidelines, I'm going to lay my paint sticks down and then place my basket. The first one is going to go right at the very bottom, and then I'm going to use my staple gun to attach that top rim of the basket to the paint sticks. Then I'm going to paint the staples black so that they blend in with the baskets better. I figured out I wanted about 3 inches between each of the baskets, and so I'm measuring so that I have 3 inches between the top of one basket to the bottom of the next. I found it helpful to place a heavy object on the top of those paint sticks just to help hold them in place while I was stapling the baskets down. And if you've seen very many of my DIY videos, you know I use this Sherlock Holmes book a lot because it is a really heavy book. Once I have my baskets attached, then I'm going to drill a hole in the top of each of those paint sticks. And then I'm going to take some jute twine and thread that through to make a hanger to hang this up. Another option would be to put some picture hangers on the back of this, or use command strips to hang it up. And I'm using a double strand of twine just to make it a little bit stronger. The inspiration piece did not have any embellishments or anything on it, and I thought it was kind of plain, and when I saw this little wooden home word at Dollar Tree, I thought that would be really cute to add to the top of this. And at first I thought about leaving it the natural color, but then I decided I wanted to add a little pop of color. So I am going to use this Cascade Color Folk Art acrylic paint and paint the home sign. And I am being careful just to paint the very front of this because the sides of this are kind of a stained finish already, and I really like that. I think it gives it a little bit more depth and a three-dimensional look, so I am just painting the top of this word. Once the paint is dry on my home word, then I'm going to use some hot glue and attach it to the top of the paint sticks. And I think it's really cute the way it is, but just for an added touch, I am going to take these little clip-on chalkboard tags from Dollar Tree and add them to the front of the baskets. And this project is great because you can store just about anything in these and just label the tags the way you would like. I put mine in our dining room, and I have some salt and pepper in the top, and then some napkins, and then some of our favorite seasonings, and it just looks really cute with this grouping of other things that I have hanging in my dining room. I will be using 5 of these paint stir sticks from Walmart. These are the larger ones, the 5-gallon stir sticks. They come in a 3-pack, so I need 2 packs, and I'll be using 5 sticks. And I'm going to be using 3 of these wide mouth quart canning jars. I'm going to be making a tray to set my jars in, so I'm going to be using 3 of the stir sticks for the bottom of the tray, and I'm going to line these up and then set my jars on top to figure out how long I need to make these stir sticks and where I need to cut them off. For the canning jars, 12 inches is perfect, but if you have some other jars around the house, you can use those. Just use what you have and measure with those. I will be using my miter box and saw to cut these paint sticks, and I will put the link to this in the description box below. It is just such a handy tool to have around the house for these craft projects. And I'm going to cut all 5 sticks at 12 inches because I need 3 for the bottom and then 2 for the long sides of the tray. Then I'm taking my sanding block and just sanding off a few of those little splinters from where I cut the sticks. I'm going to use some of this Weld Bond glue. You can use wood glue or E6000 to glue these 3 pieces together for the bottom of the tray. And once I have them glued together, I'm going to place something heavy on top and let those dry. Then I'm going to take another one of the 12-inch pieces and I'm going to glue it along the front edge, and I am gluing it to cover that front edge, not on top of it, if that makes sense. You'll be able to see what I'm doing here. And I did add a little bit of hot glue in just a couple of places just to hold that on while that other glue dries. And then I will do the same thing with the other long piece on the other side. I'm going to use the ends of two of the stir sticks that we cut, and I am going to use those for the sides of the tray. So I'm just measuring how long I need those, and then I will cut those off using my miter box as well. Then I will just take those pieces and glue them to the ends of my tray. So here's a tip if you are needing some craft supplies that you can get at Walmart. I am not going into the stores right now, but you can add them to your Walmart grocery pickup orders, and then you can just pick them up along with your groceries, and you don't even have to get out of the car. That's what I did with both of these paint sticks and my canning jars. So here's the tray all put together, and it's not perfect. It does have a few little gaps and things. If you wanted to make it nicer, you could use some wood filler and fill those in, but for this project I didn't really think that was necessary. So now I'm taking some brown acrylic craft paint, and I'm just adding a little bit to a bowl, and then I'm going to add a good amount of water to make a stain. And if you have a stain, you can use that, but I'm just showing how you can make a stain using a little bit of craft paint and water. So I'm going to brush this on, and then I'm going to wipe it off. And I am doing just one section at a time, so one side at a time. I'll paint that on, and then I will wipe that off, and then I'll move to the next side. So if you're not able to get the paint stir sticks or the canning jars, you could use cardboard or foam board and paint it for your tray, or you could use jars that you have around the house in place of the canning jars. So like spaghetti sauce jars or pickle jars. Just be creative and use what you have. Next I'm going to paint my jars, and I found if I put spray paint on the glass jar first, then that really helped my chalk paint to stick to the jar. And if you have spray paint in the color that you want your jars to be, then that's great. I did not, and so I'm just spraying the jar with the spray paint first, and then I'm going to go over it with my chalk paint in the color that I want. And the chalk paint will adhere to that spray paint much better than just to the glass jar. And I painted two of my jars in the lighter color and then one in this really pretty green color. Once I had my jars painted so they had a good coverage of paint and it was completely dry, I sprayed them with this matte clear sealer to help that paint stay on. Then I'm going to take some jute twine and just wrap it around the top of each jar about 4 or 5 times and then tie a knot. I made the two lighter colored jars the same with the knot on the side that says ball on the jar, and then the green jar I actually did it on the opposite side so that the knot was on the side where the fruit design was, just to kind of change it up. So I put these in my kitchen, I put some utensils in them. Now if you were using jars that didn't have any design on them, such as the pickle jars or spaghetti sauce jars or whatever, you could use stickers to put some words on there. You could use some stenciling, you could use some vinyl lettering. I saw some really cute, they said flip, scrape, and stir on each jar. I thought that was really cute. But you could change this up as well. If you're not into the farmhouse style, you could paint this any color you want. You could add some metallic to it, you could add some bling to it, and just really change it up to fit your decor. And I really like how this came out. Here's another jar organizer that I made. This one is using 3 jars I picked up at Dollar Tree a long time ago, and also a wire baking rack that I got from Dollar Tree a long time ago as well. but I believe that these are items that they pretty much carry all the time. So these are the wire cooling racks that I got at Dollar Tree, and I'm just using one of them, and I am bending it in two different places. So I am just using some pliers, and I figured out how wide I needed the rack to be for my jars to sit in, and then I bent up the back, and then I'm going to bend up the front as well. Now you can see it has these little feet that were the feet of the rack to hold it up off of the counter. I'm bending those up a little bit, and if you set something light in this, you could probably hang it on the wall using these, but I'm just bending them up so that this doesn't stick out away from the wall quite as far. Then I'm going to bend the front up, and I don't want those little feet sticking out in the front of my rack, and so I'm actually going to cut that wire out, and then I'll add a little jute twine accent to the front of my rack. Then I just spray painted my rack with some brown spray paint that I had, and then I added these jute twine accents just by wrapping the twine around it, and I think it made it look real cute. And I just spray painted the lids of my jars in that same brown paint that I sprayed the wire rack, and then I added a jute flower to the front of the center jar, and that was it. And look how cute it is in my bathroom. I really like it. I also decided to see what it looked like in my kitchen and swap out the wooden tray for the wire rack with my canning jars, and I think that looks really cute too. I really am not sure which one I like best. I think I might like the wire rack better. For this project, I am using two 8x10 picture frames from Dollar Tree. You can really use any size for this. You just need to scale your other pieces to go with it. I'm also using these aluminum cookie sheets. They come in a 2-pack at Dollar Tree. I'll be using a total of 3 cookie sheets, so you'll need 2 packages of these. I'm using one of these pineapple cups. Really, all I'm going to be using is the straw from this. And I'll be using one of these whistles from these party favors. I'll be using some floral wire that I got at Walmart. I had this on hand already, but I think you can get some wire at Dollar Tree. And I'll be using chalk paint in the colors Elephant, Truffle, and Ivory, as well as some just black craft paint that you can use any kind. Since I'm putting my project outside, I am going to seal it with this matte clear sealer. And I'll also be using E6000, some Gorilla Glue sticks in my hot glue gun, and a foam brush. The first thing I'm going to do is glue my aluminum baking sheets together to make a triple layer of aluminum. This will just make it sturdier and so that it will hold up better, especially since I'm going to be putting this outside. So I'm just putting some E6000 on one of the trays, and then I will press a second tray down on top of that. Then I'm going to take a third tray and I'm going to cut the rim off of this one, just because when I glue it onto those other two, I think it'll be a little bit hard to cut through all 3 layers. So this way that third rim will already be cut off. Then again, I'm just adding the E6000 onto the 2 trays that were glued together, and I'm going to put that third piece of aluminum right on top,
and then I will just weight that down with some heavy books and I'll let that dry completely. So I actually saw this project in a catalog, and so the picture was pretty small, but I wanted to use the same butterfly and dragonfly shapes, so I enlarged them on a copy machine, and I couldn't get the whole butterfly and dragonfly on the one piece of paper, and so I'm going to be cutting this out and then tracing it on a folded piece of paper so that I can make a full size pattern. Now I realize that you won't have this same picture, but you can find any butterfly or dragonfly shape that you like and do the same thing. Just enlarge it to the size that you will need. And for this, you want the butterfly to be large enough so that it will touch the frame in at least 3 places. So as you can see with mine, on the top corner, on the side, and then that bottom wing, those will all connect with the picture frame. And with the dragonfly, you want to make sure that both wings will touch the frame. So then I'm just going to trace my shapes on the foil trays now that they're completely dry, and then I'll just cut those out. And then I'm repeating the exact same steps for the dragonfly wings. Next, I'm going to use the elephant chalk paint, and I'm going to just use the foam brush and just really sloppily paint this on. I'm not trying to cover all of the silver, I'm just putting a light coat on. Once the first coat is dry, I'm going to go back over it with a second coat of paint, again just kind of sloppily, and then I'm going to take a paper towel and just kind of blot it so that you don't see any brush strokes, but it just kind of has a little bit of a mottled look, and it's okay if the aluminum baking sheet is showing through in places. In fact, I wanted it to show through a little bit more, so in some places I rubbed a little bit harder with the paper towel. After that paint is dry, I'm going to come back in with some of the truffle colored chalk paint, and you can use any darker colored paint. I'm going for kind of a rusty aged look, so I wanted it to be kind of a brown color, but any darker color will kind of give it that aged look. And I'm just going to brush some around the edges in places and just in some various spots just randomly. So now I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with this pineapple cup. I'm sure you've been wondering, but really I'm just going to use the straw out of it, and then I'm going to use one of these whistles, and I'm going to take the whistle part off of it and just use the bottom part and not the whistle. Using the foam brush and that black craft paint, I'm just going to paint both of these, and I do kind of have to squish the paint into that ribbed area of the straw, but I just cover it all up, and my goal here is to make it look kind of like wrought iron. And I did do 2 coats of paint on this. While that's drying, I'm going to take apart my picture frames, and I'm going to pull out those little tabs that hold the backing on and just remove everything so that all I have left is just the frame. Then I'm going to paint my frames using the chalk paint in the color Ivory, and I am giving these 2 coats, but I'm not worrying if a little bit of the black frame shows through because I am going to be distressing these a little bit. So while the frames are drying, I'm using a little bit of the elephant chalk paint just to dry brush on to these pieces to give them a little bit more of an aged look as well. Next, I'm going to take some sandpaper and just rub it in random places on the frames once the paint is dry. And I usually do all of the corners and then just a few random places. When you're distressing things, you want to do the edges that would get worn so it looks a little more natural. So generally the corners and the edges will get a little bit of sanding and then just some random places. Once I'm done sanding, I just take a damp cloth and wipe the frame down to get all of the paint dust off. To assemble the Dragonfly, I'm going to first add some craft sticks to the back of the wings, and this will just give it some more stability. And I'm using E6000 and my hot glue gun to glue those on. Then I'm going to figure out where I want to place them, and I'll go ahead and glue the body onto the wings using E6000 and hot glue again. Then I'm going to position the Dragonfly so that I can glue the tips of the wings to each side of the frame, and the bottom of the body will get glued in the corner. Then I'm going to cut a piece of wire about 5 or 6 inches long, and I'm going to fold it in half, and I'll be poking that folded end down inside the straw, so it needs to fit down inside the top of that straw. And then I'm just going to form the little curly tops of the antenna till I like the way they look using my pliers. And then I'll just glue that in the top of the straw for the Dragonfly's antennas. So you can see here on my butterfly there's some stripes on it. I was kind of experimenting trying to get like a corrugated metal look, and I didn't really like it, so I went back to doing it in my original technique, but that's why you see these lines on the back of my butterfly. So I'm gluing the craft sticks on the back of the butterfly as well to help stabilize it, and then I'll be gluing it to the other frame. So before I glue the butterfly to the frame, I'm going to glue the body on, and I'm putting the open part to the top, so that's like the head, so that I can insert the antenna into that just like I did on the Dragonfly. I made the antenna for my butterfly the same way as I did for the Dragonfly. However, I did make them a little bit longer. I just thought that was cuter. So these are probably a 7 or 8 inch piece of wire, or maybe even a little bit longer. So next I'm going to position the butterfly onto the frame, and as I said at the beginning of the video, I want to make sure it connects with the frame in at least three places. And so I will be gluing it on one side, and then the top, and then down on the other side. The final step is to spray the entire project with a clear matte sealer, and I would recommend doing this even if you're going to have it in the house, but definitely you'll want to do this if you are going to put it outside, and I put a couple of coats of this sealer on mine.
For this first sign, I will be using 4 identical picture frames. These are for a 3.5 by 5 inch picture, but the frames are actually about 5.5 by 8 inches. I will also be using one of these home signs that I picked up at Dollar Tree. And I'll be using some foam board. You can get this at Walmart or Dollar Tree. So I'm going to remove the stands off of the back of the picture frames, and they just come right off. Just pull gently until it pops off. Then I'll be taking all of the contents out of the picture frame, and I'm going to use the glass as a template to cut out foam board the exact size of the glass. And I will cut out a total of 4, 1 for each picture frame. I found that it was easiest to use a ruler and an X-Acto knife, and I made sure to put a cutting board underneath this so that I didn't damage my table while I was cutting them out. Next, I'm going to take some Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory, and I'm going to paint one side of all 4 of the pieces of foam board. It's best to use just a thin coat of paint to make sure that your foam board doesn't get too wet and wrinkle up. You can always add another coat once that first coat is dry. Then I'm going to take that same Ivory chalk paint, and I'm going to paint all 4 of the picture frames. And I did have to do a couple of coats of paint on these to cover up the black. Next, I'm going to take apart this wooden home sign that I got at Dollar Tree. And I was so excited when I found this there. I picked up a couple of them, and they are just held together with some little staples, and if you just kind of wiggle it back and forth, you can pull them apart, and just do this carefully so that you don't break anything, but they come apart fairly easily. I did have to use a little tool on this last one. It was a little tough, but not anything major. So now a couple of the letters have the little staple ends sticking out, and these are very sharp, and so I am going to use a pair of wire cutters and snip them off as close to the wood as I can. And when doing this, either make sure you are wearing protective eye gear, or you can see here I'm placing my hand right over the top of that, because those little pieces will go flying and you do not want to get one of those in your eye. Next, I'm going to take some Waverly chalk paint in the color Ink. This is just black. You could use any black craft paint, and I am going to use a foam brush and paint the front of each letter, and then I'm using a smaller brush to paint the edges. Once the black paint is dry, I'm going to take a dry brush and a little bit of ivory chalk paint, and I'm going to offload my brush so that I only have a little bit of paint on that brush, and then I'm going to lightly go over the edges and across the top of the letter, just putting a little bit of accent on it and just giving it a little bit of a more distressed look. And if you get a little too much of the white paint, you can always add a little bit of black over the top of it. So now I'm going to assemble my frames back together, and as you can see, the foam board has bent a little bit from that paint. So I am going to place that in the frame, and then I'm going to place the glass back in the frame so that it will hold that foam board down tight against the frame. And I'm doing this also just to give it more stability, and then I'm going to add the back of the frame back on and push those little tabs down, and now that glass is sandwiched between those, so if it did happen to break, it would be enclosed in there, but I think this will be a pretty sturdy sign. So now I'm going to take some chalk paint in the color Truffle. This is a dark brown. You could use any brown craft paint for this. And I'm going to dry brush across the frame and also across the front of that foam board just to distress this a little bit as well. And I'm going to do that on all 4 picture frames. Now I'm going to glue my frames together, and I'm going to be putting the first one horizontally, and then I'm going to alternate one horizontal, one vertical, one horizontal, one vertical. And so I am going to measure and make sure I have the same amount of overlap on each side and mark that, and then I'm going to glue them together using some Gorilla Hot Glue, and then I will use a craft stick and add some extra hot glue at the joint and put that craft stick on there to help give it a little bit more stability. Then I will just continue gluing the picture frames all together in the same way. And as you can see, when I glue the craft stick on, it's a little bit long, so I'm just snipping it off. I'm using wire cutters. You can even use a good pair of scissors for these craft sticks if they're not very thick. And the final step for my sign is to glue my letters on. And so I am just going to use some Gorilla Hot Glue and glue these right to the center of each frame. And the reason I decided to alternate horizontal and vertical was because the M on this was so wide. It was too wide to do them vertically, and the sign just looked kind of too short when I put them all horizontally, so I thought this was a good compromise, and I really like the way it turned out. So if you don't have the wooden home sign from Dollar Tree, a couple of options might be: 1, you could just paint the letters on. 2, you could print some off and like decoupage them onto your sign, or if you had a large stencil or large stickers, you could do that. So there are some options if you are not going out of your house right now and don't have these wooden letters. You can also get wooden letters at Walmart. They're about $1.08 a piece, I believe. So there's my first home sign, and I really like it. For my second home sign, I'm going to be using this same wooden sign from Dollar Tree, but you could use some of those options that I just talked about. I'm also going to use this piece of spring garland that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. An alternative to that is just a stem of greenery from Dollar Tree. And then I am going to be using this board that I have. I made this into a Valentine project, and I'll link that video in the description box below if you want to see that. But it's just made out of a scrap piece of board that came as packing material in a package I received. So you can use any type of board. I didn't have to paint this one. It came with that finish on it, but you could paint it if yours isn't already finished. So again, I did the same steps with my letters as I did before, where I took the sign apart and painted the letters black. And then I am taking my little spring garland. This was just a piece that I had left over from my Easter wreath that I made a few weeks ago. And I am going to just wind it into a circle around a couple of times, and then the last time around I'm going to wrap it around the whole thing just to hold it together. And I'll be using this as the O in the word home on my sign. So when I made this love sign back in February, I decided that I wanted to make it just so it would sit on a shelf or a hearth or in a window, so I could make it reversible, and I had thought of putting the word home on the other side. So that's kind of where I was going with that in the very beginning. And so I didn't want to glue my wreath on this because I want to be able to change it up for different seasons. So I am going to be putting a little nail in so that I can hang the little wreath on that, but I will be gluing the letters on. And again, I'm just using the Gorilla Hot Glue for this. So I just placed a mark where I wanted the nail to be for my little wreath, and then I'm going to use a small finishing nail and just tap that in a little bit so it's sticking out a pretty good amount so that I can hang the little wreaths on that. To make a wreath out of greenery from Dollar Tree or Walmart or wherever, I just took some wire that I found in the garage just laying around, and I'm using a jar to kind of form a better circle so that it's a little bit more precise than just trying to bend it myself. And I twist that together, and then I'm going to take some of the greenery and just cut pieces off of that and just start using some floral tape to attach it to the wire, and just one stem at a time. I'm just going to wrap the end, and then I'll continue to add to it all the way around. So once I have the greenery on, this is what it looks like, and it's a little messy, so I took a piece of floral wire that's green and I am wrapping it around the wreath to kind of pull those stems in closer and make it a little bit tighter of a wreath, since I don't have a lot of room on my sign for a wreath that's bigger. And if there are any pieces that are sticking out, I just tuck them in or wrap them around just so the wreath will look a little bit more uniform. And I love this, that it can be switched out, because in the fall you could make one with small leaves, or in the, for Christmas you can make a little Christmas wreath to put there. So I really like that. Now I decided, after I got this all done, that I didn't really like the black letters on this sign, so I changed it up. I painted the tops of the letters with the ivory colored chalk paint, and I have to say that I like it a lot better. I just wasn't real thrilled with the color of the background on the board with the black letters. I just didn't think it looked as farmhouse as I wanted it to, so I decided to change it up. So here's what it looks like now. And I did dry brush these letters with the truffle brown paint just to give them a little bit more of a distressed look also. But I really like how it looks with the white letters. Next, I'm going to be making this really easy farmhouse picture display. I will be using this perpetual calendar that I found in the wall art section at Dollar Tree, as well as this unfinished wood love sign, and this was in the Crafter's Square aisle. I'm going to start by removing the numbers from the sign, and I will not be using those for this project. And then I'm going to remove the hanger off of the back and also the stickers. And if you've watched very many of my videos, you know I love to use my heat tool to heat up those labels, and then they just pull right off. So this is a great tip. I will link this tool in the description box below. I use it for a lot of different things. It's just a really great tool to have in your crafting toolbox. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of sandpaper and just go over where those labels were to get that sticky residue off. Then I'm going to remove the little hooks that are on the top. These are just screws that screw right out, and they're really easy to take out. Then I'm going to fill just the center hole with a little bit of hot glue. You could use wood filler for this. I'm just filling in that hole so that it doesn't show when I paint this. And I'm going to reuse the two holes on either side, so I'm only filling in that center hole. Now I'm going to take some ivory colored chalk paint by Waverly, and you can use any type of paint. I like the chalk paint because I think it covers a little bit better, but I still had to use 3 or 4 coats of the paint on this, and that's mostly because there is a little bit of indentation on the design of this sign, and I was just trying to get it covered and get it to have a really nice even coat of paint. And I did go ahead and paint the back of this because it could show depending on where this is displayed, so I just wanted it to look all nice and finished. While my sign is drying, I'm going to take some Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. This is just a black colored paint, and I'm going to paint just the letters on this love sign. Then I'm going to paint the base of the love sign with the same ivory chalk paint that I used on the other sign. The little hooks are a gold color and I decided I want them to be black, so I am going to paint them. I used chalk paint, and really I think it would be better to spray paint these. I think the paint would stick and stay on better. Next I'm going to use a ruler and a black Sharpie fine point marker and draw lines on my little sign, and I'm doing this so that it looks like shiplap. And you can leave it just with the Sharpie lines. I decided it looked a little too clean for me. I wanted it to look a little bit more natural, like aged shiplap. So I'm taking a really fine paintbrush and just tracing over those lines with a little bit of the black paint. And I'm really not being super careful. There's thinner and thicker places with my paint lines, and that's what I think gives it a little bit more of that natural aged look. If you are new to my channel, I do lots of DIYs on a budget, Dollar Tree DIYs, Dollar Tree hauls. I even do some vlogs and travel vlogs. So I would love to have you join me in this journey and hit that subscribe button. Next I'm going to take a brush with just a very little bit of paint on it. I'm going to dry brush along the edges of my sign and then lightly over that just to give it a little bit more of that aged look. And I'm also going to do this to the base of the love sign. And then I will add those two little hooks back onto the sign. Now I'm going to set that love sign down on the bottom of the other sign, and it's going to sit flush with the bottom, and I am just lining it up. I'm measuring to get it centered. And I'm using some Gorilla Hot Glue to glue this on, and you want to make sure that it is flush at the bottom and that there's no globs of glue sticking out because it needs to sit flat. And now we have a cute little farmhouse picture frame. I just took a 4x6 photo and punched holes in the corners so I could hook it on those little hooks. And this is so cute. These are my in-laws who just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. This next project is so easy to put together.
For this project, I picked up 3 of these little glass jars with the pull-off lids, and these were in the kitchen section at Dollar Tree. I also got 3 of these flowers with the bulbs on them. It just says floral bulb. They had these, and then they had some irises and maybe some other flowers as well. I'll be using some jute twine. You can pick this up at Dollar Tree. And some Spanish moss, which I also got at Dollar Tree. And then my supplies are just scissors and a hot glue gun and glue sticks. I'm just going to remove the lid from these jars, and I'm not going to be using them for this project. I'll probably keep them though because I might reuse these jars for another project at some other time. And then I'm just going to wrap some of the jute twine around the top of the jar, and I'm just going to wrap it around 5 or 6 times until it kind of covers that top rim of the jar. Then I'm just going to tie that into a bow, and I did kind of center the bow on the front of the jar. These jars have like a little place where you could put a label, and it kind of looks like the front of the jar. So I did try to center my bow above that, and then I did add just a little bit of hot glue to hold the bow in place. Next, I'm just going to take a little bit of the Spanish moss and put it in the bottom of the jar. I don't want to put too much in the jar because I want the bulbs that are on the bottom of the flowers to show. So this is just a little bit to cover the bottom of the jar. Then I'm going to take my flower, and the bulb that is on the bottom of the flower has these little, looks like little roots on it. They were a little bit too long, and so I just trimmed mine off a little bit. And then I'm going to make a place in the center of the moss, kind of hollow it out, because I'm going to add some glue to the bottom of the bulb and then glue it down because I want this to stand up straight, and it won't stand up if I just stick it in there. So it does need a little bit of glue to hold it in place. Then I just repeat this process with the other 2 flowers, and I have a set of 3 that look really cute. They'd look cute on a side table or in a centerpiece, and I actually put mine in a tray that I got at Target for $5, I believe, in their dollar spot, and I just added some green Spanish moss to the bottom and then put these jars in there, and I just think it makes a beautiful spring centerpiece.
Next, I'm going to show you how I made this cute little topiary.
Supplies that I used for this is one of these plastic pots, and they come in a 4-pack from Dollar Tree. And I picked up one of these globe balls in the toy section. I got this green forest moss from Walmart because my Dollar Tree didn't have the green moss, and I specifically wanted green. This was about $3, I believe. And then from Walmart, I also picked up these paper twist wires, and it was 88 cents for this package. I'll be using some chalk paint that I had on hand in the color Ivory and Truffle. I needed some foam, so I'm actually using the foam out of these little succulent pots that I pulled the succulents out for another project, and so I'm just going to use this foam to repurpose it. But if you don't have any foam, then you can pick up the blocks of foam at Dollar Tree and use that. The supplies I'll be using are my hot glue gun and glue sticks, scissors, and a paintbrush. I'm going to start by just taking the ivory chalk paint and painting my pot with that, and I'll be painting all of the outside and then down about 1.5 inches or so on the inside of the pot as well. And I did have to do 2 coats of paint on this pot. While my paint is drying, I'm going to take the ball, and I found it was easiest to put it in a box and then take my moss and put that in the box as well, and it just kind of kept the mess contained and was easier to work with. Then I'm taking my hot glue gun, and in small sections I'm just going to add some hot glue and then take some moss and glue it to the ball. And I'm just going to go all the way around the ball, adding some glue and then moss. You will want to be careful because the hot glue does kind of come through the moss, and it's easy to burn your fingers if you're not careful. Once I have the ball covered in moss, then I'm just going to press it all together and compact it and make sure everything's glued down, and then trim off any moss that's kind of sticking out. Next, I'm going to take my truffle chalk paint, and I'm going to dry brush a little bit of it onto the pot to make it look aged and give it some dimension. And I do this by just dipping my brush in the paint, just get a little bit of paint on it and then wipe the excess off on a paper towel. And then I'm just going to take the brush and lightly brush it over the pot There is a little raised design on this pot, which really looks nice once you do this because the dark paint sticks to that raised design and kind of brings it out. But then I just do a little bit lightly over the whole pot just to give it that aged look. Next, I'm going to add the foam to my pot, and so I'm just removing it from my little containers, but if you have the block of foam, you can just cut a piece to fit. Once my foam is added, then I need to make the stem or the trunk of my topiary, and that's what I'm going to use these paper twist wires for. I'm using 2 of these wires for the stem. First step is just to figure out how tall you want your topiary to be, and so I'm just going to kind of figure that out and then trim off the wires using some wire cutters, and make sure you leave enough to poke down into the foam and then also up into the topiary ball. Then I'm just going to twist 2 of the wires together. Then I'm going to take my topiary ball and I'm just going to use a pencil to kind of poke a hole just to get it started in the ball. And so I'm just figuring out where I want that, and then just poke it in a little bit, and that will help me get those wires started. And then I'm going to poke the other end down into the foam in the pot, and then I will secure both ends using some hot glue. Then I'm just going to take a little bit of Spanish moss and put that in the pot to cover up the foam, and then it's all done.
Next, I'm going to show you how I made my own version of this topiary door decor.
For this project, I will be using one of these pots that come in a 3-pack from Dollar Tree. This 6.5-inch boxwood ball that I got at Hobby Lobby, and with my 40% off coupon, it was about $5. I also picked up a package of these paper stem wires from Walmart. It was 88 cents for this package, and it had like 7 or 8 pieces in it. And then I'm going to be using some moss. I got this Spanish moss at Dollar Tree. And also some burlap ribbon. This is the wired ribbon that I got from Dollar Tree. I'll be using some paint that I have on hand. This is Ivory and Truffle colors of Waverly chalk paint that I got at Walmart. I'll be using a piece of cardboard, and this needs to be as tall as the pot is. So just not a real big piece of cardboard, just something that is as tall as the pot. And then my supplies is a ruler, a Sharpie, a box cutter, my hot glue gun and glue sticks, scissors, and paintbrush. Oh, and you'll also need a good pair of wire cutters as well. So the first step is to take one of the plastic planters from Dollar Tree, and I need to figure out how to cut this exactly in half. So I decided to cut a circle the same diameter as the top of the pot, and then I'm just going to fold it over so that I can see exactly what half of that is. Then I'm just going to place it on top of the pot and mark it with a Sharpie so that I know where the halfway point is. And then there are lines on the pot that make it really easy to see where to cut. And I was going to use the razor knife for this, but I actually found that a pair of scissors worked much better to cut the sides of the pot. When you get to the bottom of the pot, though, I found that I did have to use the razor knife, as this was quite a bit harder to cut through. And you just want to be really careful doing this because it is a little bit awkward. Now I'm going to take my cardboard and I'm just going to trace the inside of the pot because I want the cardboard to fit inside. And so then I'm just going to cut out the cardboard piece and I will hot glue it inside the pot to make a back. Then I'm going to take my ivory chalk paint and just paint a couple of coats on the pot, and I'll just let it dry in between each coat, and making sure to paint both the bottom of the pot and a little bit inside the pot as well. Then I'm going to take this greenery ball that I got at Hobby Lobby, and it just has zip ties that hold two halves together. So this made it perfect for this project because I just took my wire cutters and cut those zip ties and pulled the two halves apart, and it was basically already done for me. This made this project so much easier than gluing greenery onto a styrofoam ball. I did have one little piece that came off while I was separating the ball, but I just hot glued it back on. For the stem, I'm going to be using 4 of these paper twist wires. I'm going to take 2 and twist them together fairly tightly. Then I'll take the third one and twist it a little more loosely around the 2 that I just twisted together. And then I'm going to take the 4th one and basically just place it next to the ones I've twisted together, and then I'll secure them all at the top with a little bit of hot glue. I felt like doing it this way made it look a little more natural. Once the paint on my pot is dry, then I'm just going to take a little bit of my brown truffle colored chalk paint and just very lightly dry brush onto the pot, and it will just kind of highlight the raised embossed areas of the pot and just give it a little bit more of an aged look. Then I'm going to attach the greenery ball to my stem, and to do this I'm just going to poke the stem through the bottom of the greenery ball and into the top, and it fits perfectly in these little sections, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of hot glue to secure it. Then I need to decide how tall I want the stem to be, and I noticed in the sample one that the stem that stuck up above the pot was about the same height as the pot. This pot is 4 inches, which means I would need my total stem to be 8 inches, but I actually wanted it to be a little taller, so I made mine 10 inches. Then I'm just marking where the center of the pot is so that I know where to glue my stem in so that it's centered. Next, I'm just going to add quite a bit of hot glue down the center of the inside of the pot, and then I will hold the stem on that, and I actually used a pair of scissors to help hold that down in place so that I wouldn't burn my fingers. Once the glue is set, then I'm just going to take my Spanish moss and I'll add some hot glue to the inside of the pot, and I'm going to stuff the moss in fairly tightly just to help hold it in and just make everything nice and secure. Then I'll just take my scissors and trim off some of those crazy moss pieces that are sticking out and make it look nice. Next I'm going to make my bow, and I'm using the burlap ribbon, and I'm just going to make a loop the size that I want my bow to be, and then take another piece of the burlap ribbon and decide how long I want my ends, and then I'll just place the loop on top and tie it all together with a piece of twine. And I did make the twine long enough that I can use it to tie it around the stem of the topiary as well. And when I get the bow placed where I want it, then I just add a little hot glue to that twine and trim the ends off. Then I'm also going to trim the ends of my bow, and I'm just folding them in half and then cutting at an angle to make a nice finished end on the bow. So this is what it should look like on the back. It's basically flat so that it will lay up against a door or a wall. You could even put this on a shutter. It's just a really cute decor piece. And the cool thing is that I have pretty much everything I need to create another one, because I have half of the greenery ball and half of the planter, and so I could make a set of these. I did decide to add just a little jute hanger that I tied around this just to make it a little bit easier to hang up.
The next project is this really simple lavender swag.
For this, I used 4 of these lavender floral stems from Walmart. They were 97 cents each, and I really love how these look. I like them better than the ones at Dollar Tree. They're just a little more wispy and natural, and I just think they're really pretty. So all I'm going to do is put these end to end, and I'm going to use 2 on each side and put them pretty close together so that where the flowers begin is pretty much touching in the center or really close to it. Then I'm just going to take a piece of twine. You could use string or ribbon or anything you have on hand. A twisty tie from a bread sack or garbage bag would work, and just tie this together. Then I'm going to take some of this crocheted ribbon that I got at Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to wrap that around the center so that covers up where I tied the bundles together. Then I'm just going to trim that off and secure it with a little bit of hot glue. Then I'm going to take another piece of my crocheted ribbon, and I'm just going to tie a loop around the center, and that's what I'm going to use to hang it. I just wanted to go for a really simple look with this, but you could change it up in a lot of different ways, but I like the simplicity of this.
For this last project, I'm going to be upcycling a Dollar Tree planter, and I'm actually going to show you in two different ways with this one planter. So first, I am just painting the planter with some gray chalk paint. And for this, you really want to choose a planter that has a design on it, like this one. You can see the raised area on this, and that is really going to make this design pop when we're finished. So now I am painting the other half of this planter with the ivory colored chalk paint. I'm just doing this to show you the two different looks. When I'm finished, I'll go back and paint it the way I want the whole planter to be. So on the dark gray side, I am going to take a light gray craft paint, and I'm just going to dry brush across that raised design on the planter and see how it just brings out that design. And this dark gray and light gray combination really make it look kind of like a concrete or cement planter, and I just really like the look of that. If you're wanting more of a farmhouse look, you can paint your planter in a lighter color and then take a darker color. I'm using a truffle colored chalk paint. It's a dark brown, and I'm doing the same dry brushing technique across the raised design to bring out the design, and it just gives it more of a an aged look, and this is definitely more of a farmhouse look. So you can see by just using a little bit of paint, you can really change up the look of these planters. Here is the more farmhouse looking one, and then I also have another planter that I have made. I will link the video to these planters in the description box below, as well as this card right above here, so that you can see how I did the technique of all of these planters. But this one that I just showed you is by far the easiest one. This other one took a lot more time, but I really love how old world it looks. It's just a really neat look. So the technique for that will be in that other video. And then I also did another planter in the kind of cement look, and that is this one here with the grass and the dragonflies and the cattails, and so that technique is in that video as well. So this is the last DIY of this video, so head on over and check out that planter video. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching. If you are new, please subscribe. I'd love to have you stick around, and be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Thank you, and have a blessed day.